when you talk about this hockey team, it was the Kachucks, and it was Eichel, and it was Austin Matthews, and it was Quinn Hughes. It wasn't, and it became Dylan Larkin, who's in a
Mhm.
very similar note as Jack Hughes. And I think this, you hope for this kid's career again, like Rangers are going to have to play him, and I'm sure that'll be fantastic for the Rangers. But you hope for his career that this is the launching pad now, for him to kind of take another step up.
All right, Loft Sports official podcast coming to you with a live reaction after the United States Canada gold medal game in the final of the Milan U.S. men's hockey tournament, and for the first time since the 1980 Miracle on Ice, the United States wins the gold medal in men's ice hockey. Tom, I got Tom with me back on the feed. How we feeling, brother?
Feeling great, man. What a game.
Absolutely phenomenal game. Hughes wins it for the U.S. at 1 minute and 49 seconds into overtime, beating Jordan Binnington by a score of 2-1. Really in a game that was, for the most part, really dominated by Canada. Connor Hellebuck, though, the goalie for the Winnipeg Jets, the main goalie for Team USA, he kept them in the game, really from the second period on, when Canada really put forth a monstrous effort to try to tie the game when the U.S. was up 1-0. We'll do a period by period breakdown. We'll run through the recap. But Tom, just overall thoughts on the game and all.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Canada played really well. The two penalties US took, I think, swung the game. I thought the US played a really good first period.
Hmm.
I thought it was even in the second period until that back-to-back penalties by the US. After that 5-on-3, it really felt like Canada took over, and the talk was about the Canadian superstars, right? Like, having the ability to have players like McDavid or Celebrini or McKinnon, and what Canada did over the course of this game was really move them around. McKinnon played a ton in the third period. I expected to see a lot of McDavid, but it ended up being a lot of McKinnon, and when you have those guys that they just have such an ability to change the game, it made it tough for the US. I think the US was okay playing a game like this. Honestly, I expected this game to be a lot like the Four Nations championship game a year ago, in that I thought both teams were going to kind of feel each other out. They didn't want to give up too much ice, didn't want to allow the other team's better, more dynamic players to get into the open ice and create things. And honestly, it felt like the opposite of that game. It felt like both teams were okay going up and down. And I don't necessarily think that suits the United States. They ended up pulling it out tonight, but I thought the style of play suited Canada. But you said it, Connor Hellebuck, the knock on him is what he doesn't win the big game, right?
Hmm.
That's what people
Right.
say, which I always think is a ridiculous thing when we talk about hockey goalies. To win the big game in the NHL, you got to win what, like 12 to win a Stanley Cup?
16.
Yeah,
Yeah.
16. So
Yeah.
you got to win even more. So I never know what is a big game or what isn't a big game. But he won the big one tonight, and he deserves it. We're both Ranger fans. We love you, Igor Shesterkin. Maybe he's the best. If not, it's probably Connor Hellebuck, and he showed it tonight, and he showed it throughout this Olympics as well.
Mhm. Yeah, he had a phenomenal Olympics. I mean, U.S. overall, right? I mean, they didn't lose a game. Where they go 6-0 in the tournament fully. Of course, Canada too. They didn't lose a game the whole time until the gold medal final here against the United States. But yeah, I have to echo that. Connor Hellebuck, right? I mean, 3-time Vezina Trophy winner. He won the Hart Trophy last year too, because Winnipeg Jets actually even part of the reason they won the President's Trophy last year too. They were the best team during the regular season, but they fell, and I think it was the second round of the playoffs last year, and people again were just kind of on Hellebuck at that time, where he never had that big established victory for himself, and then he gets it though today to prove any doubters, any haters wrong, that he is a absolutely phenomenal goaltender, and as you mentioned, one if not the best in the league, within the top
Yeah,
two
yeah,
probably
we're
in the
talking top
National
2 or
Hockey
3.
League. Mhm. Yeah. So why don't we break it down? Let's do a recap period by period here. So the game starts off, the US with their first shift, really dominating the game in the first 2 minutes. They really put a lot of pressure on Canada within that first shift. A lot of time spent in the Canadian defensive zone. The US didn't at this point have a shot on goal, though. Their first shot on goal wouldn't actually come until Matt Boldy gave them a 1-0 lead at the 6-minute mark of the first period. But right away, you could see when Canada started to put some pressure on the in the U.S. defensive zone. Connor Hellebuyck, man, he looked sharp early. He stopped, I think he stopped 7 or 8 shots in the first period. Lot of hitting early on, a lot of physical game. Tom Wilson, our friend from the Washington Capitals, he delivered a big one to Dylan Larkin in the U.S. zone. Larkin, though, to his credit, got right back up right away. No, no injury or anything like that. And then, yeah, at the 6-minute mark, Matt Boldy, just absolutely phenomenal play going through the Canadian defense. I believe it was Makar and Taze that were actually their top pairing that he basically went through there to beat Binnington to give them a 1-0 lead. And he assists on that goal were from Austin Matthews and Quinn Hughes, who both had really good tournaments. Quinn Hughes, I think he had a point in every single game um, in the tournament. And then with about 3 minutes left in the first period, the U.S. got the first power play of the game. They couldn't capitalize on it, though. Good defense from Canada. So the U.S. is up 1-0 against Canada after the first period. And to echo what you said earlier, Tom, I think U.S., very much won that first period against Canada.
Yeah, I think what they wanted to accomplish in the first period, they did. I thought they skated really well. You talked about that first shift of the hockey game. I thought it really set the tone, and us being American fans, I was really excited. I was like, all right, they looked like the fear with the U.S. versus Canada, right? Is like, can the U.S. skate? They have a lot of
Mhm.
pieces, and I'm sure we'll talk about roster construction at some point on this podcast. The question was, can they skate? And through that first period, I thought they looked good. I thought the power play was okay. They generated a couple chances from that. But again, you get out of the period 1-0. The big thing to me was they really limited Canada's chances in the first period. They didn't give up a lot of big chances. They played the game probably at the pace they wanted to play. And you're going into the first intermission saying, all right, you're 40 minutes away. If you can find a second, really put Canada under pressure, you feel good about where you are heading into that second period.
Right, and then as we get into the second period, this is when Canada really turned it up. They, in my opinion, they really dominated all much of the second period. McDavid early on had a chance for a breakaway. Connor Hellebuyck made a big time save. Canada really spent a lot of time in the offensive end for that first 7 minutes or so. The play was, a lot of play in the U.S. zone. Nelson had a chance off a giveaway, but Binghamton, excuse me, but yeah, Binghamton made a big save. Hellebuck stops McDavid on the breakaway. Canada ended up getting the first power play, and here's what we'll get into it here. Canada gets their first power play after Gensel takes a penalty, and then 27 seconds into that penalty, the U.S. take another penalty. This time, Charlie McAvoy for a hooking, and then Canada all of a sudden looking at a 5-on-3 here, and U.S. is in a lot of trouble here. Luckily, though, the U.S. was able to kill both penalties, so that gave them a little bit of a momentum swing. And then really the remainder of the period, Canada again really put some pressure on the U.S. But again, as we were saying, Hellebuck absolutely terrific in this game. It wasn't until about 2 minutes left. Cale Makar scores to make it 1-1 on a perfect shot to beat Hellebuck. He was set up by his defense partner, Devon Taze, and Hellebuck was beat, and that would be the only shot that did beat Hellebuck. And then at about the 8-second mark, Faber rung one off the post for the United States. It was actually a double post. So then it was 1-1 after the second period. Tom, I know you felt that U.S. played a lot better than maybe some guys were saying in the second period. Wanted to hear your second period thoughts.
Again, like I think sometimes you're getting forechecked, you're getting trapped in your own zone, but are you giving up a lot of quality chances? And I really thought up until they took the two penalties, the U.S. didn't give up a lot of chances. Yes, Canada was cranking up the pressure a little bit. Finland kind of talked about that after their game, where it's like once Canada gets you on their forecheck, it's really difficult. But I think the U.S. with a 1-0 lead were okay with that. They were denying real clean looks for Canada. There were bodies in front of the net. They were taking away shooting lanes. I think they were content with it. And then really the two penalties really swung the game. That brought momentum, and we have to give the U.S. penalty kill a ton of credit. We'll talk about their kill in the third period. They killed two here. They were perfect through the Olympics, which is unbelievable. Guys like Vinny Trocheck, J.T. Miller, Brock Faber, guys like that who or Brock Nelson, who weren't necessarily the favorite picks, were brought for those types of roles, and they did it. But yeah, the game changed. The goal that Canada scored was really well. Was a really nice goal. Excuse me. NBC broke it down. Eddie Olchuk did a great job breaking it down. How they created the space. I kind of wish the U.S. I don't remember who it was, what defenseman it was, but they help off on McCarr to help on Tays, and I would have rather them just stay on McCarr, but they got one of their, dynamic players in space, and as you said, it's a shot that no goalie in the world is saving, and then after that, you could feel the momentum swinging. Everything started to change. It was kinda like, can the US get out of that period? Yeah, the US had that chance late, but other than that, they didn't create many chances in the second period, so they get out of there 1-1, and now you're like, this is gonna be a really tough period for the
Mhm.
Americans.
Yeah, one as you said, 1-1 after 2. And it was we figured going into the 3rd period, I mean, this is it, US, they gotta turn it on. Like you said, not a lot of chances in that 2nd period. Who from the United States is gonna step up here and make a big play? So, entering the 3rd period right away, Mike Sullivan changed up the lines a little bit. He moved Dylan Larkin up to the Eichel and Brady Tkachuk line. He moved down Matt Tkachuk. And nearly a minute 30 in, Canada nearly gets another goal. Hellebuck, though, again, phenomenal save on Devontae's in front of the net. And then he actually later on, about a minute later, Hellebuck stopped Celebrini on a breakaway. Canada only 5 minutes into the third, they had two big time chances in front to take the lead in the game. There was another spot where Nathan McKinnon completely missed a wide open net. He should have had it. He ended up hitting the side of the net. And then on the other end, U.S. races down the ice. Vinny Trocheck, Tage Thompson, they both had a chance out in front of Jordan Binnington to possibly take the lead. They just weren't able to capitalize at that point. There was also a really big moment in this game. I think it's going to be talked about. The U.S. did get away with a too many men on the ice penalty that was not called. I feel like in a standard regular game, the referees would have called that, but we're talking about the gold medal game here, 1-1. I see why the referees didn't call it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that, Canada would bring up, as maybe an excuse as to why they may have lost the game. Um, Again, though, there was another chance where Canada had a swarm in front of the net, but again, Connor Hellebuck did a fantastic job keeping it a tie game at 1. As we get later into the 3rd period, Sam Bennett high sticks Jack Hughes, ends up with a 4-minute double minor penalty as he drew blood on Hughes. But Canada, give them a lot of credit. They killed the penalty up into a specific point because then Jack Hughes actually took a high sticking penalty of his own. So we have basically what happened was there was a 4-on-4 for 49 seconds. The 49 seconds go, and then Canada has a minute and 10-second power play against the United States. The U.S., as you mentioned earlier, phenomenal penalty kill all tournament. So they kill the penalty. And again, after that, Canada had a few chances, specifically Macklin Celebrini. He had a couple chances to break the tie, but the 3rd period ends, and it's United States 1, Canada 1 as we head into overtime. Tom, any overall thoughts in the 3rd period from you?
Yeah, you mentioned the line changes. I thought Mike Sullivan coached a really good hockey game
Mhm,
today. He tried, and so did Cooper, so did John Cooper from Canada. Both of them were mixing and matching lines. I fully expected Connor McDavid. I tweeted this to play like 13 of the 20 minutes in the 3rd period, and it wasn't. It was McKinnon. McKinnon played a lot, and he got moved around a lot. And the U.S. mixed and matched things too. I thought Jack Hughes was really good. The penalty was unfortunate. He was out there, he got caught on a long shift on that power play where he was trying to make something happen, and I don't really want to fault him for that. And then he got caught on the ice for too long and took that penalty. But
The puck took a kind of a fluky bounce too, the way it
yep,
it bounced up off the ice. Mhm,
yep. Um, and then this will be the Connor Hellebuck period. I mean, you mentioned it. He made the paddle save, which is like the save we'll see for the rest of our lives.
mhm.
He makes the save on the Macklin Celebrini breakaway. Connor McDavid on the last power play got the puck in the slot, I think twice, like eerily reminiscent to the Four Nation finals where he got the puck. I don't know if he just missed the net or if the puck was saved, but he had chances late in the period. As you mentioned, Nathan McKinnon missed a wide open net. I mean, something that was talked about and something that Canadian fans wanted to remind American fans is that they had the superstars.
Right.
They had the game changers. They had the dynamic players. And the fact of the matter is, Canada did. And those guys didn't deliver today. It's not to take anything away from them as players. They delivered all Olympics for this team. But Macklin Celebrini had chances. He didn't score. Connor McDavid, this was probably the best the U.S. has played him in the last 3 times they've played him.
Mhm.
Hellebuck had a nice poke check on him on a play late in the third period as well. So they really kept him under control. And despite Nick McKinnon probably being one of their best players, he had those chances late where he just didn't score that open net. And I think he might have had one or two other chances as well. I mean, the U.S. got dominated in this third period. And then we go to 3-on-3 overtime, which you'll talk about in a little bit. And as a U.S. fan, I don't know about you, Finn, not loving it. I mean, you look at
No.
some of these guys for Canada that can skate and create things in the open ice, and now they're going to have a lot of space to work. And the U.S. looked tired. They didn't look the same as they did in that first period, but they found a way. But I'll let you get to the summary.
Yeah, we'll break down the summary. We can also maybe even talk about if we feel like, 3-on-3 overtime in the gold medal game of the Olympics makes sense to do, really. I'm not gonna
We can touch on
we
that
can we
next.
can we can touch on that a little bit there because I personally feel like it is a little ridiculous to do that for not even just for the gold medal game, but really as you advance past the group stage.
We're on the same. I'll touch on that once you summarize
Yeah.
it. We're on the same page there.
So we'll give it a little overtime summary. So as Tom just mentioned, right, 3-on-3 for 20 minutes is what's scheduled here. Uh, remember, big Hughes. So basically, what ended up happening is Hellebuck stops McKinnon on one end. Jack Hughes then rushes up and down the ice. There was a deflection. The puck went off into a little crazy angle, and the U.S. actually ended up in like a 3-on-1 situation. And then a minute 49 into overtime, Jack Hughes beats Jordan Binnington, and for the first time since 1980, as I said, the miracle on ice, the U.S. wins the gold medal. So revenge from the Four Nations game from last year. The U.S. wins by a score of 2-1, and I think this is actually the U.S.'s first time beating Canada in for a gold medal. Right? They lost 3-2. What was it, 8 years
Overtime
ago?
in
Yeah,
2010.
in overtime in 2010, and then
That one
Canada
hurt.
beat them earlier too. I think it was like 5-2. They kind of beat them pretty good in that game. But yeah, U.S. was able to win for the first time since 1980. Then, yeah, like I said, Canada, of course, right, like I said earlier, about that too many men on the ice, which should have been a penalty in my eyes against the United States. I'm sure a lot of Canadian fans might also complain, kind of like how we were just talking about the 3-on-3 for 20 minutes, and how but again, you would think, as you mentioned, Canada's got the skilled players, so you would think, like, if you got McDavid, you got Celebrini, you got Nathan McKinnon, you got those guys on the ice, they should be able to beat any 3 that the US can put out there to match up against them if they were to play all together, so, but yeah, U.S. wins, and then they just handed off the gold medal to I just saw to the U.S. All the gold medals were handed out, and of course, I also think it's a little ridiculous too, making the Canadian players just stand there for the silver medals. I mean, those guys don't want to be there, standing to receive silver. I get it, like you announce your name and everything. It's still a cool achievement, but the fact that you didn't win gold there, that's extremely disappointing. So.
Yeah, that silver medal will be off my neck really quick. But
Yeah,
that's,
exactly,
I,
right.
I mean, I mean, it's nothing to frown about. I mean, I know for Canada it feels like a failure to win any medal in the Olympics is unbelievable.
Mhm.
A lot of time and effort goes in, but yeah, yeah. You mentioned what I was going to touch on, which is if any Canadian fan wants to complain about penalties, if you're going into overtime as a Canadian fan, you have to feel great. You could roll McDavid, Celebrini, McKinnon with a pair for every other shift if you
Mhm.
really wanted to. And that doesn't we haven't even mentioned Cale Makar,
Yeah.
who is just as good as a skater as those guys. But ultimately in the overtime, it was Makar that goes in and tries to pinch. He gets caught. It gives the US the ability to kind of like dump a weird puck in. And the US had 2 guys around the puck, which kind of forced Canada to flood towards the puck. I don't know who the defenseman was on Canada, but it was the defenseman, and then whoever they're retreating forward was, and Zach Rowensky picks up the puck and he finds Hughes, who's coming on late. An unbelievable shot, like a spot only he could put it. And yeah, I mean, I texted a friend after the game and I was like, the only two who I felt could skate with the US, with Canada 3-on-3 in overtime were Hughes and Eichel, and sure enough, it was Hughes, and good for Jack Hughes. I mean, we're Ranger fans. I don't necessarily love him 95% of the time,
Mhm,
but it's been a really rough year for him. It's been a rough couple years for him now. He's banged up a lot the last 2 years. He didn't
mhm.
play great in the Four Nations. I thought he was good for the US tonight. I thought he was one of their better players. I think Mike Sullivan agreed, which is why when the line shifted in the third period, he played a bit more. He draws that penalty and then takes one. Um, so for him to score that goal, and again, like he's kind of supposed to be what those guys are for Canada for the US, right?
Yes,
He's a
yes.
former first overall pick. When he's good, he's as dynamic as any player in the NHL. And when you talk about this hockey team, it was the Kachucks and it was Eichel and it was Austin Matthews and it was Quinn Hughes. It wasn't, and it became Dylan Larkin, who's in a
Mhm.
very similar note as Jack Hughes. And I think this, you hope for this kid's career again. Like Rangers are going to have to play him, and I'm sure that'll be fantastic for the Rangers. But you hope for his career that this is the launching pad now, for him to kind of take another step up. It sounds crazy to talk about, right? He's 24. He's played God knows how many games and played as well as he has. But at 24, you look at him and look at what he did in this tournament and go, all right, is this a chance for him to take a next step up, and become what McDavid is, not to the level of McDavid or maybe Celebrini or McKinnon, but become one of the top guys in the NHL. This could be the launch pad for him to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alright, I mean, he's right now currently he has fallen behind like a guy like Celebrini, who's been absolutely phenomenal player since he
Scary talent,
yeah,
man.
dude, he's
Scary
crazy
talent.
talented. I spoke about him a little bit, last week on my pod during the week about how great he has become and, at
19
the age of
years old,
19 years
19.
old, dude. What were we doing at the age of 19? I was probably just, like, firing up
Freshman in
Madden
college.
franchises or something, just hanging out, what was I was a freshman in college maybe at the
Yeah, we
time,
were
and
in we were at Stack.
yeah, we were at Stack, and this guy's freaking got, like I think he's got, like, 80 points on the year in
Unbelievable. And
NHL.
he's one for this that it's like when you watch him play, if this is your first intro to hockey, if you watch him during the season, he's this good in the season. I mean,
Yeah.
he's scary for his age. And when Canada when they first started doing stuff and they paired up him and McDavid, I tweeted like, uh-oh, like that's a line that scares me for the Canadians. But still, that's a lot of pressure on a 19-year-old, and he
Mhm.
delivered. Like everybody in the world now knows who Macklin Celebrini is, and you better remember the name because he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
That's alright. Mhm. So, another thing we'll touch on real quick before we get out of here, just kind of how the teams were built up against each other. So, when I say built, we talked a lot about how the United States really had a lot more depth coming into this game, specifically defensively. Just the way they have, Quinn Hughes, who was phenomenal all tournament, Charlie McAvoy, who, we actually mentioned at the end of our NFL free agency pod how he was injured in the Four Nations last year, so he couldn't play against Canada in that game. Really felt like coming into this game, the United States depth was just so much better than Canada's. But Canada, again, just the individual players they have, the superstars of McKinnon, McDavid, Celebrini, even Crosby, which I'll be honestly like Crosby. I didn't think it was obviously, it's a big loss for Canada not having him in the game, and I'm curious to see how major his injury actually is for
Yep,
him to
I
have
agree.
to miss this game, with this magnitude. But I think even if Crosby had played, I still feel like Canada did enough to win this game. It was really, in my eyes, it was just Hellebuck was just standing on his head, able to make the unbelievable saves to keep the US in the game and give them a chance to win in overtime. So,
Yeah, if
yeah.
we're talking roster construction here, the first thing I want to give a shout out is to Bill Guerin, who built the
Mhm.
roster, and he took a ton of slack from United States hockey fans. Why isn't Jason Robertson on this team? Why isn't Cole Caulfield on this team? Two Ranger guys made it who neither JT Miller's not been good for the Rangers this year. He hasn't. And Mike Sullivan's the coach, and Sullivan and Guerin took a little bit of slack for it. I think it was clear that this hockey team, they built a team a year ago. They built a group of players that they were really, really comfortable in, and they weren't going to really deviate from that group. And the team they built came really close a year ago, and and in the Olympics, they were able to get over the hump, and Guerin and Sullivan and anybody else who built that roster, they were comfortable in the style that they wanted to play, how they wanted to grind games out, their penalty kill, their power play, their special teams unit were the best in the Olympics, and I think they showed some of these guys that they took, whether it's JT Miller, whether it's, Vinny Trocheck, whether it's Brock Nelson, who they caught a little slack for taking him. Every guy on this team had their role and they accomplished it. And if they play Canada again tomorrow, maybe Canada beats them and we could talk about, roster construction then. But they built a team that they thought could win a gold medal. And they, especially a team that they thought could beat Canada. And quite frankly, did beat Canada a year ago. And they've played them 3 times. And in 2 of the 3 times, they've played them super close. They didn't deviate from any of that. And you got to give a shout out to the U.S. Hockey National Team Development Program, the NTDP as well. It got founded in '96, and I think the goal of it was to catch up to Canada. I don't know if the U.S. is caught up to Canada. I think it's way closer now than it's ever been in the history of this
Absolutely.
sport.
Mhm.
And who knows, maybe if NHL players are allowed to play between 2010 and 2028, the U.S. might win because people forget that 2010 team was really, really good. And they had some absolute superstars on that team like Patrick Kane. Um, so the US in 96, the late 90s determined we want to become players in this and a vast majority of the players on this team have come through that development program in one way or another. I think 16 of the 25 players, Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, Charlie McAvoy, the Hughes brothers, the Kachuk brothers, they've all at least spent some time in that development program. And when the US built this team, they leaned on it. So credit to them. When you look at Canada, to your point, I think Crosby would add an impact in this game. I think the U.S. I think Canada will look back on that and go, "I wish we had Sidney Crosby in this game." But to your point, they should have won this game without him. If you look at the statistics, you look at the chances created, you look at the chances missed. Canada probably should have won this game. This is an older Canada roster. They went in with Marner. They went in with guys like Mitch Marner, Crosby, Brad Marchand, Drew Doughty, Mark Stone, like older guys. Even McKinnon's 30. Like they went in with guys on this team that it was maybe not a last hurrah for them, but you're going to see a way different looking Canada team in whatever it is. If it's the next
Mhm.
4 nations they do or the Olympics, this was a last hurrah. And now I think you're going to see. And listen, there is some really good young talent in Canada. You're going to see them build around. McDavid's 29, but he's not going anywhere. So it'll be McDavid. It'll be Celebrini. Cale Makar's still only 27. You're going to see an injection of youth for Canada moving forward. And for the U.S., this is a day that a lot of people were proven right. Where even after the Sweden game, people were like, "Oh, that Jason Robinson could be on this team." You need guys who are willing to kill penalties. You need guys who are willing to match up against the other team's best skaters. The U.S.'s bottom 6 guys, Trocheck, Miller, Nelson, they did that in the Olympics, and everybody involved in making this roster deserve credit for that.
Absolutely. 100% team effort win, and, let's all celebrate United States' first gold medal since 1980. Tom, thanks for joining me. Thanks for going through the recap. I'll probably come out with another pod during the week. Maybe we're talking like some basketball or the NHL will be starting back up, I think on
Boy,
Wednesday. So, maybe we'll talk some NHL during the week. And then, of course, stay tuned for next Friday when, Tom and I get together. We'll talk more, our second part of NFL free agency. So enjoy the win, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you later.